Hello, it's Phillip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London. Now, it's a special occasion for me to produce this particular book review. It's about a special book, and I've got some friends to help me. These two here, little teddy bears. One's from the Supreme Court and one is from the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council. And they're going to be here watching me closely as I talk to you about a book. And it's this little book here. It's only a very small paperback book. It's being produced by Isobel Williams. It's called The Supreme Court, A Guide for Bears. And you can see the two bears, green for the JCPC, Judicial Committee of the Privy Council, and white for the Supreme Court. There they are there. And I haven't given them names, so you can think of names for yourself. This is the book. It's a very short one. There's nothing on the spine. That's the back. There's a foreword to the little book written by the retiring president of the Supreme Court, Lord Neuberger, and he makes a few comments. The book itself has been written and illustrated by Isobel. And if I can just show you a little bit of the book, there's the front page there, and then there we go, you get the main drift of it. But what you're then doing is you've got a foreword from David Neuberger. You've got, after that, some very simple statements about the Supreme Court and various points. I'm not going to go all the way through the book because it would spoil it. You would have to buy the book yourself. But I'd like you to see the end of the book as well there. Get some idea of exactly where we are. Now, there we go. It makes a little comment at the back. It says, "Not all bears are lucky enough to occupy a court. Please look for a reputable charity that helps and avoid products or entertainments which exploit us. Thank you." Now, I say that because I bought these two bears. Here they are. And they are my little props to go with this excellent little book, which is not just for children. I think it is a wider market than that, because what they're trying to do is to make the Supreme Court much more user-friendly and much more well-known, I think, to users. Now, I say that because I've been very privileged to have been given a tour of the Supreme Court, and I've also met quite a few of the justices over the last few years, and I've found it a very interesting, a very useful development for the 21st century in how courts of the future might look. In fact, it's all recorded, and it's a more pleasant experience than some of the really, frankly, Dickensian buildings that I often have to visit. Now, Elizabeth and I have written this review, and Elizabeth has actually been very proactive with it, and she's given the title for our review, "If you're a lawyer and you don't buy this book, you are truly unbearable." Well, we've got to get a few of the jokes out of the way first, but they're not laughing, so don't worry about that. Now, if you bear with me, even if you can barely bear to read this, I'll tell you about the new guide to the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom. It's called simply The Supreme Court, A Guide for Bears, but don't let that worry you. You don't have to be a bear to read it. I can almost guarantee that adults, kids, even lawyers and judges will be beguiled by its charming and informative message and its quirky yet serious approach. And already it's been very popular in the law journals. They've covered this review, and I'm very delighted because I think it's important for people to know about the book and the work of the court. Even Lord Neuberger loves it. Now, I know he's retiring and Baroness Hale is taking over, but I can prove that he likes it because as the current president of the UK Supreme Court, and it's current until the 2nd of October, and I'm just under the wire to thank him very much for all his work as president and to welcome Baroness Brenda Hale, but he's written in the foreword these points, which I'm sure Baroness Hale will agree with. "You are about to see them, the bears, explain a bit about what our court does and doesn't do," he says. Isobel Williams' drawings capture the essence of these inquisitive and endearing characters, and her words help to bring to life some of the things they get up to when the justices and staff aren't looking. So you are looking a little bit like some, perhaps, part of a rather a little sort of story for children, if you like, but it's got a very serious purpose to it, which is why I've decided to do this review. Yes, the book is presented in a glossy children's book format with two teddy bears, there they are, on the cover, waving their paws in greeting to welcome you, and they are there to keep an eye on us. Now, the thing is, they're waving their paws in greeting to welcome you into the august precincts of the Supreme Court itself, which is the old Crown Court as I knew it some years ago, before it was completely modernised. But then again, the book is as much for adults, of course, as for children, because the intention of Isobel Williams, as author, illustrator and publisher, is to engage everybody in this quite serious subject, which her book does, and in great style too, I think. Apparently these unusually sophisticated and articulate teddy bears, these two, live in the Supreme Court gift area, where, with presumably one swift swipe of a contactless credit card, you can adopt one. Well, I did it and adopted two, and you can go and buy them down in the canteen. But they are really lovely. They're nice gifts. But it's a memorable place to go to because it is different from any of the other courts that I've been to in the country, and of course overseas, because I've also been to the courts in other countries. You are, of course, reassured that none of the bears will object to being wrenched like this from their spiritual home. Well, they've got a new home here in Richmond Green Chambers, because they have a mission to explain, and that's what the book is about. It's good to know that the bears are travelling around the world, says Lord Neuberger, spreading the word about the UK's top appeal court as they go. And don't forget the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council as well, because they have a very important job to do, as many academic lawyers will know, especially if you're an undergraduate law student. Thus the bears take you on a whimsical journey through the highest court in the land. You laugh out loud and you learn a lot about British justice, about the court itself, and about its history and purpose and the historic building it occupies. Clearly, Williams has been relentless in her search for bear references and imagery to add resonance to this narrative. She's found a wooden bear in Court 1, a stone bear in Court 3, and two polar bears under glass, a gift from Canada's Chief Justice, which are there. And as I say, when you go to the courts, there's a lot of history. The fact that it's all now recorded, the proceedings are recorded, it shows very much that the transition from the traditional to the modern, where we keep the best of everything. Pointing out that there are Supreme Courts in many other countries, especially the United States of America, Isobel Williams has diligently dug up an obscure quote from a 12-volume work on the history of said US Supreme Court. Quote, "The Constitution would not have been noticeably affected," growled the author of these tomes, "if Sherman Minton's chair had been occupied by a stuffed teddy bear from 1949 to 1953. Well, poor Sherman Minton. What a way to be remembered. But I'm afraid that that's one of the things, when you have these props, these little gimmicks, these darling little teddy bears, you're bound to have this sort of thing cropping up. And I just wonder whether dear old Teddy Roosevelt realised what he was in for, but he wouldn't. But he was different, Teddy Roosevelt, very different indeed. Or, and we're going to get on to that, and we're reminded too that the teddy bears were of course named after that president, 1901 to 1909, Theodore Roosevelt, one of the first and fiercest advocates for the conservation of wildlife and of America's wilderness areas. And I've always remembered him. I know he did a lot of things, but with a lot of fondness. The word indomitable always comes to mind with Teddy. Let me conclude. So if you're happening to be passing the Supreme Court or a certain bookshop in Lincoln's Inn, that's Wilder's, you really must buy this book. Not doing so doesn't really bear thinking about. And the publication date is cited as at June 2017. I'm recording this in the late summer as we get to the new legal term on the 2nd of October 2017. A lot of changes because the Supreme Court is changing its personnel. But this guide, I'll just show it to you again, Supreme Court, A Guide for Bears, is something I shall treasure because I really did like it. And it just tickled my sense of humour. There's the back. Isobel's done a lovely job. There's a bit, guess what, about America. There we are. Lovely illustrations too. Thank you, Isobel, and thank everybody actually, because I hope this is of some help to the Supreme Court, to all the people involved in working there, and the very important work they do. Thank you to all, and we know we've got a good home for our bears here. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.